Hey everyone. Well, we're here for the last of our 6-day book discussion on the strength of a woman. Thank you for everyone who's been tuning in daily with me. I appreciate your energy and your time. If you have not been tuning in, no worries. We have a replay of each video that's in our video section. So just hit videos and feel free to watch each one. And if you're more comfortable on YouTube, each video is also on our YouTube. You can type in Stronger Than My Struggles to find us, or I'm on YouTube under Sapphire Hill. So today, we want to talk about the strength of a woman. And today we're actually going to talk about my story. Um, we've had a great week talking about all of these different women and the adversity that they've overcome and how they've used their struggle as a platform to stand on to help others. I admire that. That's my whole focus with Stronger Than My Struggles, is to help others to be able to stand on the platforms of things that they feel like were detrimental to them or have held them back, or um, things that we thought we couldn't overcome. And so I like to start these with the introduction. And so the introduction says, the strength of a woman is unmatched by most forces of nature. There have been news reports of women lifting cars to free their trapped child. Incredible, right? For centuries, women have been the backbones of their families and communities both. Yet the cry of the woman who nurtures all is often unheard. Looked to for strength, she's not allowed to be weak. Women must bear the children and bury them. Bury the ones who brought us into the world, and even our spouses. We nurture children who grow up to resemble in no way the child we bore and loved. No matter the adversity, we're taught that it's just life, and real women deal with it. The women in this book did more than just deal with it. They made it work for them. Life happens. There's ups and downs, and some of the downs can almost kill you, literally. But they're still here. Not only are they here, they're standing strong to tell their stories in hopes of encouraging another woman to find strength through her own struggles. When I connected with this group of women from across the US and UK, I knew that I had found a special bunch and was honored to be able to share their stories of smiling in the face of adversity. The strength of a woman can be found in her smile, the shine of her eyes, the swing in her steps, and even her laughter as the world crumbles around her. To look at many women, you never imagine the struggles they're facing or have had to overcome. Women wear the mask of survivor well. Our hope is to touch at least one woman's life and give her the courage to push forward towards our own happiness, her own happiness. And so I started this with giving you some questions to think about just while we go over my story today. And the questions I left you to ponder are, um, Jesus, I'm in the wrong part. So the questions I left you with are, have you ever felt like you were an imposter in your own life? Life circumstances can leave us feeling as if we'll never have any other options. Have you ever felt trapped in a life that you hated? How did you get out and into a lifestyle that you enjoyed? And are you destined for greatness and hiding behind your past, labels, and fear? And so today, we're actually talking about my title, Learning to Love Myself, because it wasn't always easy, that's for sure. So one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make as a woman was deciding that it was acceptable to be myself. I never had a chance to grow into me. Every time I started to blossom, there would be something there to remind me of my origin. I was common street trash, born unwanted, raised a victim. For so long, I felt this was just life. Used and abused physically, mentally, and sexually at a very young age, I was never groomed to be a little girl, let alone a woman. I was groomed from infancy to adulthood to be a people pleaser. Even worse, I was trained to please men. My mother allowed the men in her life to groom me to their liking. When I didn't fit in their image or idea of what my behavior should be, she removed me from their lives. My mother moved in with a man and his kids, taking my brother and sister and leaving me behind with my grandmother at one point because the man's daughter and I didn't get along. When you grow up in an atmosphere of misuse and distrust, it's hard to ever find self-love and worth. It's never easy to find something that hasn't been identified for you before you started searching. You're just moving along blindly, wondering if you're on the right track. That was me. By the age of 4, I was living in a household where I'd been beaten and forced to sit in a corner if I said my prayers or grace wrong. My mother sat idly by, affirming that the will and desires of this man must be met. By the age of 8, I was being sexually assaulted. By 12, it was happening on a regular basis. My abuser even paid me hush money. In a house where my mother treated me like Cinderella, he manipulated me to think his inappropriate affections and pocket money equated to his caring for me. Can anyone guess how I measured love for a big part of my life? From the age of 8 until the age of 14, he groomed and molested me. His training stuck with me in ways I didn't notice for almost 2 decades. So I'm going to stop here. I felt that because I was physically abused, emotionally and sexually mistreated at such a young age, that I was bred to not only be a people pleaser, but to please men specifically. Are you a people pleaser? Have you ever traced the origin of why you seek acceptance? You know, over years, I became hardened because I refused to be a people pleaser. And I refused to ever let a man feel like he was getting something from me again. Like, I became hard. I became abusive. Like, I became physically, verbally, and mentally abusive. I had to actually stop myself at some point because I became the abusive one in my relationship. I did not want to be a people pleaser any longer. And I didn't know how to stand up for myself versus being violent and angry. And so another thing that I've mentioned thus far is that my abuser used money and his inappropriate affection as a show of love because I wasn't getting it at home. And I grew to measure love with how much men gave me and how much I was able to please them. And then eventually I rebelled. I rebelled and I no longer wanted to please. In a home, school, and social environment where I was constantly told I wasn't enough, I shrunk into myself. At 5 foot, I'm the runt on both sides of my family. I never weighed more than 100 pounds till I was in my 30s. I was always told that I was too ugly, too dark, had no body, wasn't sexy, to the point that I hated the way I looked. And though I thought that the women I encountered who looked like me were beautiful, I couldn't see the same beauty in myself. I grew up in the 90s being short, dark-skinned, and bone-thin. Wasn't in. Being molested and paid for it made it easy to turn to the streets when my mother stopped caring for me. I'd been groomed to please men. I started turning tricks on and off around the age of 15 when my mother told me one day that she'd buy my deodorant when my father paid child support. Mine was set. She never worked a day in her life. Her husband, my childhood abuser, who forced me to live in a corner, had been murdered in our home when I was 6 years old. His insurance settlement and Social Security allocations left for her and my sister ensured that she'd be almost stable. My father skipped paying child support to take care of his wife's kids. I had unstable and bad relationship after bad relationship. I was comfortable with many things that most women would not dare contemplate. I've had sex with a loaded gun to my head, in front of groups of strangers, and more, because that's what some guy wanted. For some time, I was even able to convince myself that that's what I wanted too. I wanted their love and attention. I was willing to stoop to any level to get it because I was so used to being treated like gutter trash. Whenever I find myself in social circles and groups, I'd be the get along girl. I'd go with the crowd consensus unless it was something extremely out of my comfort zone. Then I'd peacefully bow out rather than try to bend the group to my will. That became my go-to strategy, bowing out so I wouldn't be uncomfortable. When I jumped into the entertainment industry over 10 years ago, I was attracted to the allure of the fact that I could now become popular over the internet. That meant I could portray whatever character I wanted and not have to worry about being rejected as the real me. I did it, and it worked. I gave them sex pot, but sprinkled in some of the real me. People loved the image that I portrayed. I was being accepted by a wide audience, and for a while, that was okay. I felt loved and like people were interested in me. There was a disconnect, however. Whenever I had to fly to Baltimore to go to an event or a shoot or a convention, it was easy to see that I was a fraud. The only thing there was that was the sexy clothes and the nerdy, normal me. I could not hide the fact that I was a fraud. I was nothing like the party girl, free loving, let's get high and hook up chick that I portrayed myself to be online. At parties and events, I do the obligatory work and then shrink into a corner to talk to another introvert who was looking to escape or pretend I was too busy to partake in the fun going on around me. I returned from the industry thinking it's better to be miserable and alone than miserable and surrounded by people. I went back into my depression. I didn't date for years because I felt like every man I met just wanted to use me for sex or a place to stay. It was easier to be alone than to date. Life was just too much for little old me. I kept running. I'd isolate myself deeper and deeper until I found myself alone. My last relationship seemed to be a turning point in my life. I'm not sure what happened, but for the first time, enough was enough. I fell in love with a man who was still in a messy situation with his soon-to-be ex, and his kids was involved. And she made our lives hell. And I was willing to put up with it. I was a man pleaser. He always wanted to change me. We met right before I started growing my locks. I was never good enough, but he wanted me. He told me his kids made fun of my looks. He wanted to change the way I dressed. I constantly felt emotionally degraded, but I put up with it. Then he started drinking, my biggest pet peeve. I tried to put up with it, but eventually I snapped. I told him he couldn't drink in my home or around me. I couldn't deal. He had to find somewhere to go and get drunk, so he did, with the hood right down the street. And when he brought her into our lives, that was just the last straw. Because he didn't just cheat, he kept seeing her, making me feel my lowest every time because he would physically walk past my door with her. I felt like a prisoner in my own home. I shut down for almost 2 years. I did very little that I couldn't do from my couch. I wanted to be free. I realized I had spent so much time playing up to my fears and the things that others perceived as my flaws that I was just settling for life. I was close to 34 when I finally decided it was time to start letting the real me develop. I'd been in therapy for over 7 years, but suddenly I was making real breakthroughs. I locked my hair and started enjoying the growth process. For the first time ever coming out from behind the wigs and weaves, not only was I forced to face myself, but for the first time, others could see me. I kept feeling this nudge inside to be free, to be me, to be happy, but most importantly, to tell my story. I started a video series, The Sexy Sapphire Chronicles, on YouTube, and I started to break down my life, category by category. As I did, I also started to share life lessons, and my transparency was appreciated. People started to enjoy them. The feeling of being accepted for me was something I wasn't used to. I stopped dressing in clothes that made me uncomfortable in the wearing of them and the attention that they would bring. Always a writer, with most of it stashed away, still unseen by anyone other than myself, I started to take my writing seriously. Instead of the 2 magazines I was on staff for, I started actively seeking out opportunities to write. Eventually, I was being paid for what I loved to do for the first time. Still alone, I wanted to build bonds and relationships with people. It's just it seemed it wasn't happening for me. It may be my fault. I'm damaged and I'm skittish. I do the best I can. It's hard being real in a world that's obsessed with the opposite of everything that you think you are. A free workshop changed my life. And afterwards, I knew it was my time to just go be me and see what happened. So I decided to stop accepting things that didn't fit into my life. From myself and others. I cut off all the men that were using me for sex. Literally, I just told them, I don't like how I feel after I have sex with you. And I kept moving. Then I resolved that I publish a book. Any book. I have so much writing stashed away. I know that I have 20 books, but I needed to just start with one. And I published my first book. Once I had accomplished that dream, I was hooked. And I published another and another. Once I published my second book, I was ready to really branch out and show people who I really was. I never forgot how a challenge to myself seemed to be the key to changing my life. I turned my camera on live on Facebook and I told strangers who had been following my progress, my wildest dreams. I told them all about what I wanted from life and my business and how I wanted it to grow. And I watched myself grow from that moment. And they did too. I turned my camera on regularly to update them. For the first time in over 10 years, I found a way to have office space. No more isolation at home, just sitting around depressed. More books followed, and I decided to incorporate my other love with my love of writing, teaching. I've longed to be a teacher forever, but the schooling wasn't for me, nor teaching in the traditional school setting. Stepping into my greatness, I just decided to teach. I launched a workshop series and then coaching programs, and people showed up. Every workshop hasn't been a success. I've canceled a few, but enough have been a success that I feel good. My coaching clients are happy, and they give me validation that I'm on the right path in a way that I've never felt. I sit back and I write this essay and I think about how long I spent being weak because I was taught to bend to the will of others, to show my devotion. How long I positioned myself to stay in the role of victim, thinking that all the gifts I knew I had should go unused because nobody wanted these gifts from a girl like me. When I started Stronger Than My Struggles, I knew it was me against the world. But as I watched this movement grow over the last few months, 2.5 years in now, when I wrote this book, we were months in. As I watched this movement grow over the last few months, I understand that for the first time, not only am I doing exactly what I want, but I'm free to be me the whole time, and I'm making friends and connecting with people on new levels. I'm even dating for the first time, and dating healthily. I'm quick to set my boundaries, and I know that respect for me and my wishes is just as important as respect for theirs. No more people pleaser. Life is about balance, and I decide I deserve to be happy too. I'm always talking about creating the life you desire and deserve, creating the life you desire and deserve. And I wouldn't say it if it wasn't my goal. Like, I'm always focused on creating the life I desire and deserve. And the reason I say that is because we get focused on the things we want. Like, we're always, I want, I want, I want. But often we don't get the things we want because we don't really believe that we deserve them. And so I focus on realizing that these are things that we desire and deserve, because nothing that you've been through disqualifies you from having everything you want in life. And sometimes I need to remind myself that. So I'm always saying the things we desire and deserve. And so one of the things that I focused on in there was trying to come in terms with myself and loving myself as a whole. And one of those things that I had a problem with was loving my physical being, because from childhood, I had been told that I was too dark, too skinny, too unattractive. And it was something that I heard at home just as well as at school and in my neighborhood. And so I struggled with my self-esteem. hating the way I looked, my features, my frames, and everything in between. I was often ridiculed, but I knew that other women who looked like me were beautiful and just couldn't see the same in myself. Have you ever struggled with your self-esteem and worth? Do you or others constantly criticize your looks, your weight, your smile? I think that from my story, some of the most important things that we can use as words of wisdom is when I said that it's hard to find something that hasn't been identified for you already before you start searching. Like when we go on a scavenger hunt, we're given a list of items. We know what we're looking for. We may not know where they are, but at least we have an idea of what we're looking for. So when we're cooking, we have a recipe. We know what items we need to go get from the market. But happiness, happiness is a thing where no one else can define that. And so if you don't know, what happiness looks like for you, as you go on this journey to find happiness, you may get lost a lot. You get lost a lot. Yeah. Also, I realized that I spent so much time playing up to my fears and things that others perceived as my weak flaws that I was just settling for life. So I refused to show up as who I knew I was and to dominate the world the way I can because I was so worried about how others would perceive me and the things that others were saying about me and how others were judging my past. But it's my past that allows me to stand in my greatness today. Also, I said that I decided to stop accepting things that didn't fit into the life that I deserved from myself and others. And I think that we have to focus on that because, again, we get stuck on the things that we want. It's always the things we desire, the things we desire. But I think that we lose focus of, do I deserve these things? Because the things that we deserve in life, we have to be cognizant of when we're accepting less than. And it's not always something that you're accepting less than from someone else. Sometimes it's yourself. Sometimes you're just not in integrity with what you should be doing for yourself. Sometimes others are not in integrity with what we deserve. So people may talk down to us. Our boss may not pay us enough. Our spouse may cheat on us. And there are people who feel like they don't deserve better than the situations that they end up in. And so we have to be cognizant of creating the life we desire and deserve. And so we have to remember to be kind to ourselves. Be kind to ourselves. But I think the biggest takeaways from my story are that I realized that my abusive childhood led me down a path of seeking validation and being a people pleaser. And I was able to reclaim my power because I realized that I wasn't pleasing people out of my own will, but more than likely fear of how they would leave me or treat me if I did not please them. And for me, being free meant losing all of the things that I hid behind for acceptance. I took off my wigs and showed my hair and stopped wearing the tight and revealing clothes daily and just accepted myself for who I was. And I found that the world did too. Making a concrete decision that I didn't like the way that my life was going and that I would only accept what I deserved and no less, it was a pivotal moment for me. Because from there, I started to accomplish goal after goal and to have an abundance in my life because I refused to have less than abundance in my life. And so I think that, so often we get caught up and we forget that no one validation is as important as our own. And these words, self-esteem and self-worth, they start with self because that's what really matters. I appreciate you for tuning in this past week. And if you missed any of the videos, feel free to hit our video tab and catch the replays. I'll see you again soon.